Okay, everybody, welcome to the second part of our series about a deep dive into the calligraphy alphabet. In each of these parts, we focus on one letter at a time. So if you want a brief introduction, you can go to our post about the letter A. To get started today, all you need is a plain pencil, a notebook with lines on it, or you can download our lined paper, and a calligraphy pen. I recommend the Tombow Fudenasuk hard tip pen. Looks like this, and I'll link to it as well. Okay, so today we are going to be learning how to write the letter B in lowercase, or a minuscule letter B is what it's called if you're using fancy calligraphy talk. So our end result is going to look, let's turn up this. Our end result is going to look something like this. So that's what we're going for eventually. First, I want you all to get out your pencils and we'll go over the shapes together. So the letter B has two new shapes. Nothing is similar to the letter A. So we get to learn something new this time. But our first shape is going to start right at the mean line. That's also your dotted line. So you start right here, go up to the capital line, and then down to the baseline. That's our first stroke. You'll notice it has a slight tilt to the right. We talked about this before. My preference in calligraphy is for everything to have a slight right tilt. Some people do a really extreme right tilt, which we'll talk about later. Some people prefer more of an upright look, but the way we'll learn the basic letter is with a slight right tilt. That's our first stroke. Our second stroke starts down here at the baseline, goes up to the mean line, then curves down, almost touches that first line, and then goes into a connector. So there's a few things I want to point out about these shapes. On the first shape, we're going for an oval look up here. We'll talk about what you can do to change the letter B, kind of alter this shape to make your alternates, but for the basic letter form, we're going for an oval. Down here, this is a similar shape to our bowl that we used in the A. It has a nice right tilt to it, and it's oval shape, not too round, not too skinny. And the important part of this B is that this little loop down here almost touches that stem. That's important because let me show you what it looks like if you make it too far out. So if you do something like this, it can still look like a B if you know that's what you're going for, but there can be the tendency for this to look more like an H. So you really want to make sure that that little loop almost touches the stem in our basic B form. So let's go ahead and practice writing the letter B a few times, starting at the mean line, going up and down at an angle, picking up our pen because this is a sharp transition, doing a nice oval shape, almost touching, and going into a connector. Let's try that again. Almost touching and going into a connector. And remember, this connector line is super important because that's where your next letter will start, or it really is the space between your letters in calligraphy. Since we are connecting every single letter, we have to give them room to breathe, so our connectors are super important. Go ahead and practice writing that simple form of the letter B on your lined paper. Try to fill up at least 2 sheets. You can go ahead and pause the video and then come back, and in the next part, we'll talk about using your calligraphy pen. All kinds of pens in here. All right, this is the pen I designed that mimics the Tombow Fudenasuk pen. It has a nice, it mimics having like a stiff pen and has kind of a nice little square edge to it. So I really like this one. All right, so using your calligraphy pen, you're gonna do the exact same shape. You start with really light pressure going up, then transition to heavy pressure. Pick up your pen. For the next stroke, you do light pressure to heavy, almost touch, oops, and then do a connector line. You'll notice sometimes when I'm doing really light strokes, my pen will skip. That happens too when you use a regular pen. If you're using light enough pressure, sometimes you'll get little gaps in your lettering. You can go back and fill them in. So, important things to note here. Remember, your hand likes to do heavy pressure. So we transition from thin to thick immediately. When we're going from thick to thin, we have to give our hand time to catch up to our brain. So we start the transition about right there. You can see it starts tapering. So let's try that again. Get my black pen. Okay, so we start right here, go up, and then thick, up, almost touch, and then our connector line. Do that a few more times until you get some B's that all look similar. They don't have to be the same like I mentioned in our previous video, but until they all start to look a little bit uniform, that means you're getting the muscle memory down. So try that a few times. Now, what I want to talk about is adding flourishes to your B. So if you draw a B that looks like this, it's okay if it's at the beginning of a word, but it kind of looks strange, right? Because this line just starts out of nowhere. One thing I really like to do for a flourish is just to add a little loop like that. Then it just gives a little bit of finish to this side of the B. You can add it in later, or if you really get good, you can just do it automatically like this. So all it looks like is a little C hanging off there, a little C shape. Don't get too fancy with that one. If you want your flourish in the beginning to look a little bit different, you can also add a shape like that to it. So that gives a little bit different look. There's lots of different ways to add opening flourishes. That's what I call them. So it opens up the word. All right. And if your B were at the end of a word, you don't really want that little connector line sticking off. So instead of continuing this on into a connector line, you can simply do a little C shape right there. Or you can make your C shape go upwards like that. And that adds just a nice little finishing touch to the end of the word. So there's lots of different ways you can do that. Okay. Now let's talk about some alternates. So alternates are ways that you can slightly change the form of a letter to make it look different or to draw it in a different style. I showed you a few with the letter A, but there weren't a ton because A is kind of a simple letter. We mostly just changed the baseline. So B is super fun because there are tons of alternates that you can do. I'm going to show you my favorite ways to do alternates. There are literally infinite ways that you could draw this letter, so I'll just show you a few of my favorites. Now, one way that you can always make alternates is to change the size of the loops in your letter. Let me show you what I mean by that. So we'll make this opening loop much larger than it was before, and then this part can stay the same. So we just added a totally different element to this letter. We have this giant loop up here now. It's going to make the letter really pop. You don't want to do it with too many letters in a word, but it's nice to do every once in a while. So again, we do a really big loop and then our same second stroke. Fun, right? Okay, there's other ways we can change it. We can keep that same shape right here, but then we just do a nice regular shaped B like that. So if we wanted to keep everything super, super legible, we could do it like that if we didn't want too many loops in our letter. All I did was with the second stroke, going like this, and then just bringing it out. So that's another way we could do an alternate. A lot of times I will see people, so for example, if our word was cab, we'll have a C, and then an A, and then for the B, maybe it won't even connect to that letter. So we do a shape like this, where the B has a nice little flourish over the rest of the word. So that's one thing we can do. We can also do more of a traditional copperplate style B. So this one has it has 2 strokes, but they're a lot different than in the other styles of B we just did. So a copperplate B looks more like this. So it curves under and then almost touches there but doesn't. We do a short little downstroke and then a connector. So that's a copperplate B. It's more traditional. So you can also experiment with that. If you wanted to do sort of a hybrid type calligraphy, you don't have to have any loop at all in your B. You can just do a straight downstroke and into that. So you don't have to have any loop at all actually. So let's go through some of our alternates. We did the big loop B. We did the B with an opening flourish like that. We did a B in the copperplate style. And we did a B without a loop at the top, and then a B without a loop at the bottom. So there's lots of ways we can change up our B. You can also mess with the baseline a little bit. So, like we did with the A, this B is going to dip down below the baseline. So we, instead of enlarging this loop, we enlarge this loop down here. And it still follows the principle of almost touching that stem, so we make sure it still looks like a B. So again, we have this little loop at the top, and then we exaggerate this one down here. And this one actually does touch, that's fine. I've seen some people draw their Bs to where the bottom loop actually intersects the stem, like this. So that's another option. You really can just play around with the angles of each stroke. Now, I showed you, remember the A that looked like this? That's one of my favorite ways to draw letters, is where everything is connected by one line. So let's try that with the B. So instead of having that sharp transition right there, we have a nice smooth transition. And everything is one line. So we go up, down, smoothly transition, down, and up. Okay. So that is the letter B. Let me draw it one last time for you. Let me know in the comments what you like, what you don't like about these videos, if there's anything else you'd like me to do, more tips you're looking for, things you'd like to troubleshoot. I'd love to hear from you. So until next time, happy lettering. Bye.